30 March 2021, and I'm joined by Bobby Supiya, and he is a very, very decorated military person, a security analyst, a former British paratrooper, and Zimbabwe National Army advisor. How are you, sir?
I am fine, Mr. Gambakwe. How are you?
Very well. So what is your rank? What was your military rank?
Major.
Major. So you're Major Bobby Supiya.
Major Supiya, correct.
Thank you very much, sir. And thank you very much for allowing us to hear the information that you're going to give us here. And the situation in Mozambique is of concern to a lot of people. And I hope that you'll be able to shed light on what is happening there since last week and also before that. So I would like to start with an understanding of how do you know about Mozambique? What is your background in Mozambique?
Well, I am a political scientist and a military analyst who is a former combatant, former soldier, former advisor, and is obviously interested in world security developments. And I monitor international security developments. I studied war, and therefore it's a subject that I very much understand.
Okay, so have you been in Mozambique in combat or as a consultant?
I visited Mozambique a couple of times in the mid-1980s at the time of Operation Grapefruit and Operation Lifeline. These were Zimbabwe National Army operations joined, actually, in order to combat Renamo.
Okay, and now let's go to this immediate situation, which is there, where the insurgents attacked last week. Can you take us through what you know, or what your understanding is of what happened last week?
And I think in order to understand what happened last week, you need to go back and look at what happened before and understand what is the cause of this situation. Naturally, there are sorry, are you still online, Gambakwe?
Yes, I just gave you space so that you can. Yes.
Very well. A vacuum was created in Mozambique, a security vacuum, because of inadequacies within the Mozambique government, comfort following the demise of Renamo and Dhlakama. And as a consequence, you have had these jihadists who have seen the opportunity to infiltrate because of the promised wealth of the gas reserves and the oil reserves that are in Mozambique. So when you have a situation where there is a security vacuum, and by that I mean that the Mozambique Defense Forces, Mozambique Army, and the police are very thinly stretched out. Mozambique has a coastline of 2.4 thousand kilometers, so 2,470 kilometers to be exact. It has a land border of 4,700 kilometers. Yet it only has 11,200 men under its arms. It's not possible to defend the whole of Mozambique. It's not possible to offer security to all the nationals of Mozambique, as thinly spread out as the country is and as the populations are. And therefore, in those circumstances, where there are promises of riches, given the situation developing in Somalia, Nigeria, the jihadists have seen an opportunity and they have taken it. And since 2017, They started their attacks on Mocambique da Praia and Palma, which is right at the uppermost north of Cabo Delgado, culminating in the attacks that's occurred of recent. It is a strategy which they've been following. They have managed to terrorize the people in the region, and bearing in mind, it is the first step of any insurgency or terrorism, is that they exercise what's called agitational terror. Agitational terror is whereby, call them what you like, terrorists, insurgents, they go and frighten the living daylights out of the local population so that they fear them, and therefore they will be able to control them. That's what happens. That's why you have all these mass casualties, beheading, the cutting of limbs, doing things that ordinary folk wouldn't think of doing, that normal armies would not think of doing, in order to gain that upper hand of frightening the civil populace into supporting and following them. So those are the scenes that you have seen in Mozambique from 2017, and it's built up to today. The response of the Mozambique government has not been good. Essentially what they've done is they have surrendered security to the private companies who are guarding the gas installations. Now, we all know that those private companies are there just to protect the installation. They're not there to protect the civil populace or the structures or the government posts, such as police posts, military barracks, government buildings, etc. So therefore, they're all open to attacks. And in a typical insurgency war, they pick up on the soft targets. And that's essentially what they've been doing until they've gathered sufficient confidence to cut off cities like Palma at will, to cut off Mocambique da Praia, to cut off Kisanga even, culminating in the situation that's developing today.
Okay, so I think we need to go a little bit into detail. This past attack, it came after a long period when there was no attacks, and it looked like the government of Mozambique was now in control. What went wrong?
Basically, one of the strategies of guerrilla warfare, insurgency, you call it what you like, is that you attack when the enemy least expected and when the enemy is their weakest. The Mozambican government was drawn into a false sense of security, that the situation had prevailed, that they were now in control. So therefore, they relaxed. They stopped aggressive patrols and by and large withdrew forces that were live in Delgado. And as a result, a security vacuum again built up, and the insurgents have now attacked and taken that opportunity. And I think what drove them into finally executing the operation which they've just done just now was the announcement by the French company that they were going to commence operations again. They simply want to be known that they're still around.
Okay, so my understanding is that there is a military base at the middle of Palma. Is this correct?
A military base belonging to who?
To the Mozambicans.
Naturally, there would be, but that base is not strong enough to be able to supply or to support live patrols, given the size of the area that we're talking about. That base is essentially on the coastline, is probably there to supply some kind of patrols to support the private security companies that are occupying the gas ventures. But certainly it requires a bigger effort than that. What is needed right now is a cooperation between the Tanzanian armed forces and the Mozambican defense forces, in addition to calling for SADC support. Mozambique did very well with Zimbabwe National Army support during the war with Renamo. In fact, I can quite confidently claim, and you'll find plenty of people who support this, but for the fact that the Zimbabwe National Army intervened in Mozambique, Renamo will still be alive today. Therefore, there is this requirement for a SADC solution, for a regional solution. You need Tanzanian troops in the north to seal that border and for aggressive operations to be conducted by a joint force of Zimbabwe National Army and Mozambican Army to conduct hot pursuit operations to mop up these insurgents. Because at present, they are operating at will. And they run back to Tanzania when it gets too hot, and they come back with impunity.
Okay, please give us a bit more information on Tanzania. You have mentioned that they are going into Tanzania. We need a bit more explanation there. What is the role of Tanzania in this insurgency?
It is not rocket science that the insurgency is using Tanzania as a transit point or as a hiding base. They naturally have some support from locals in Tanzania. They speak the same language, Swahili. They have disappeared when the heat gets turned up in Mozambique, and they've reappeared again. So given that there is a connection, they, by the way, they're called Al-Suna, or previously they were called Alu Suna Wajama, which is now called Al-Suna for short. They claim to have a connection with Al-Shabaab in Somalia. So you can see the pattern that's developing on how the Tanzania is in the lines of communication. Clearly, these people get their supplies from somewhere. They store their arms somewhere. They got their live stock, i.e. bodies, the combatants, from somewhere. My suspicion, which is confirmed by other sources, is that the source is Tanzania.
Okay, so if Tanzania is involved, how would this work? How would that negotiation happen? Who should talk to the Tanzanians about this? Can Mozambique president go to Tanzania and negotiate this?
Absolutely. This is, I think what needs to be required is that there needs to be a medium. You recall that when President Filipe Nyusi was inaugurated, President Magufuli, late President Magufuli, did not attend. That's most extraordinary. If anybody can read situations, they should have read something in that. So therefore, there needs to be a medium either coming from the Zimbabwe government or from the South African government, or even jointly for that matter, to approach Tanzania and resolve this problem before it gets worse. Because mark my word, it will get worse.
Okay, how did it start?
Worse,
what happened for this problem to start?
Riches. People see money. Wherever you see money, by way of gas resources and petrol, oil, for argument's sake, suddenly you find blood. Blood generated by arms. Human greed, corruption, call it whatever it is, it fuels all that. Just like what diamonds do. It's the same thing.
Okay, so if Tanzania is a player, who are the other players in this conflict?
Certainly, they have some Islamic support. Whether it's coming from ISIS or from whoever, and ISIS doesn't have the capability to transport arms from one country to another. It's difficult to pinpoint from who, but I can certainly say that there are dark forces involved in this. And some of those forces may actually be in Mozambique itself.
Okay, and I'm sure that is a clear explanation. We have the French who are running the big gas plant there. We've got the South Africans who are running the oil field there, the 50 billion offshore oil field. We've got other players in who are mining the minerals there. I think the Tanzanites, or these special minerals that they found last year. There was a big fight there. Zimbabwe and Malawi, have they gone in there yet?
I don't normally like to comment on security matters involving my former clients, but all I can say, it would be folly to think that there would not be some kind of special forces presence. And I'll stop there.
Okay, I think that's totally perfect. If anyone wants to talk to you about that specific topic offline, I'm sure your number is on the screen. They can get hold of you and talk to you. I would like to take you to the latest news that came out today, and I want us to analyze a bit more. So, Club of Mozambique, one of the only English newspapers in Mozambique today, reported that Portugal is sending 60 special forces into Mozambique who are going to be based at the center of the country. Is this going to be effective?
No. Special forces have a specific role. One is to gather intelligence. Two is to train local forces. That's not going to take a day. I believe Americans are already there doing that. As a fighting force, the answer to that question is no.
Okay. And Portugal has got a big interest across Mozambique. Should they play a bigger role? Mozambique is such a bigger country. What should be done? You mentioned already the cost is 2,400 kilometers. What would you do if you were the president of Mozambique?
I would call upon for a regional solution, for the region to contribute forces. There is a pact, a military pact, signed by all the presidents of these countries to come to the aid of another when you are under threat. Mozambique, for a reason best known to themselves, have been very slow to press up on this. And they need to take action.
Okay, but I don't think they've been slow. There was a meeting in Malawi, there was one in Botswana, and President of Zimbabwe, Idi Mnangagwa, flew and met with President of Mozambique, Nyusi, all in 2020. What is the sticking point?
It may come down to finances. I don't know. It's just something that I can reasonably estimate. Mozambique's GDP is about 555 million. Their defense budget is 245 million. They don't have the financial resources to push this. This is why the private companies have been funding security.
Okay.
They need no.
Okay, so the private companies have been funding security through dike Solutions or security group. Is Dyke doing a good job?
Dyke can only do the job that it's tasked to do. And that job is to protect the perimeter security of the gas ventures. They cannot go beyond that. They are not a substitute for the security of Mozambique. They cannot protect Mozambique civilians, Mozambique nationals, Mozambique government structures. It's not their mandate.
Okay. So what can Dyke do? Because remember, Dyke is not working alone. I think let's go a bit deeper into the security, the private companies that are operating in Mozambique. So what I did today is I got the list of all the missing people in Mozambique, and I think I shared it with you in the morning.
Yes.
There is approximately over 1,000 people that are missing or that were missing. And I want to read down the companies. We've got about 17 companies here that were involved. But there were about 4 or 5 companies that are quite big. For example, African Century had 72 people missing. Remote Site Solutions had 105 people missing. True North Kia Projects had 93 people. Moz Environment had 43 people. Mondial had 80 people. And the rest are like Projectos, Dynamicos, 22 people. ST, Specialized Transport, 30 people. Afrimat, 20 people. And Azul Consulting, 10. Are these military operators, these guys who I'm reading here?
They're not all military operators. There's private companies, construction companies, all different companies that are operating there. They're not all security. But what it shows is that the threat is massive. What it shows is that there are bigger interests at stake here. The fact that you have all these companies operating that, knowing fully well what the security environment is, means there's a lot at stake. There are big rewards to be earned. That's why they're taking these risks. The bottom end is that somebody needs to come up with a financial package. And I'm sure if the funds are put in the disposal, there will be no shortage of military support.
That brings us to the next questions. The British, the Americans. I was in Mozambique on 14 September 2019, and they've built a massive embassy in Maputo. I think that's like the biggest embassy they have. Why are we not seeing them assisting the region? For example, assisting Zimbabwe, we've got a very strong military to get equipment and to go into Mozambique.
The simplest answer is I don't know why there has not been that support. I have to say to you, in today's economic situation, driven by the current COVID situation, money is not simply floating by. All countries have serious restraints. They have budgetary restraints. The economy's been grinding to a halt. That's why there's a massive effort now to revive things and to open up the economies so that things can go back to what they call the near normal. At some stage, I believe the events of last week have woken up a lot of governments and has brought them up into reality that the threat from this group called Al-Sunnah, Al-Shabaab, call it what you like, is real. And the fact that so many people have died and so many people are reported missing, that is going to put pressure for action. That action is needed now.
Okay. I now want to go to the conspiracy theories And I wonder if you've heard about this. But we do have a few people who give us information in Mozambique, in Palma. And what they say is that when the attack happened, South Africa sent helicopters to Palma. And they started firing missiles into Palma at random, like willy-nilly, without knowing where they're shooting at all. And they caused all these casualties. What do you say about that? Is that a possibility?
I would like to think that the South African military is sufficiently experienced not to carry out operations in that mode. Having said that, I am conscious of the fact that accidents do happen in war. There is what you call the fog of war. It's never too clear a picture. But the description that you give is worrisome, to say the least. I doubt if that would be correct. If casualties had been caused by helicopters, I think you've seen some of the hold-up residents in the hotel. I don't recall hearing any comments, complaints about people being shot by bombs or by firepower coming from helicopters. Everything is all about what the insurgents were doing, the terrorists were doing. So it's possible you could have a few casualties from a misidentification of a target, and you end up with what you call collateral damage. It's a very impolite way, but it's a fact. War is a nasty business. You do get civilian casualties. That's possible. But to say that hordes of people died as a result of indiscriminate shooting, that's not a method which I identify with.
Okay, but something is wrong in this whole operation. Let's go to the ambush. 17 vehicles carrying expatriates going out of Palma. 10 of them failed to make it. Why was this allowed to happen? To get out of the hotel where they were safe, to go into danger without any air support or surveillance, and to get captured like that?
Desperation drives people to do desperate things that gets people killed. I believe they panicked. One of the reasons could have been that there was no confidence that the perimeter security of the hotel could sustain an attack. And therefore, an opinion was arrived at that it's better to make a break for it. And sometimes it works. The only thing is, these insurgents are not stupid. These insurgents are experienced. And I can tell you that laying an ambush for potential escape routes is part and parcel of any force that's attacking targets. The insurgents would have laid these ambushes, would have anticipated, for two reasons. The reason why they would block off any exits is to do one thing, to protect the force that's attacking those targets from reinforcements from Frelimo coming up the field. That's one. Obviously, nobody thought of that. And then secondly, to ambush any escaping forces or targets from the target area. And that's essentially what happened. The ambush was already there, waiting for reinforcements coming from the other side. And these people just simply fell into it. So if there was any military cohesion or some military thought into the escape. They should have anticipated this. And of course, it was a disaster, complete disaster.
Okay, Major Bobby Supiya, and you are a security consultant. Formerly, you have assisted with operations in the Zimbabwe National Army. And is there any other areas in Africa where you have seen operations?
No, not in Africa, no.
Okay, but how, because I wanted to ask you from your assessment, how bad is this situation? Where are we now? Are we at the verge of a very dangerous situation?
We are not at the verge of a collapse of the Mozambique government, to put it quite colloquially. But we are at a very dangerous stage of escalation. Because what happens is these insurgents, they gather steam. And as they say, a rolling stone gathers more moss. This is what is happening in Mozambique. There is even talk about the insurgents distributing stolen food and medicine to the local populace in order to gain their hearts and minds. What is the government going to do about that?
Okay, I think that's a bad situation. Is it possible that we'll see the same groups attacking here in other countries in Southern Africa?
If the situation is not arrested, I can tell you that our country, lines of communication will be cut. We're in danger. It is in Zimbabwe's interest to get involved. We don't have a choice.
Okay, then in that case, let's go to the issue of sanctions. The sanctions that the USA have on Zimbabwe, are they still serving a purpose given the current environment with these insurgents next door in Mozambique?
The simplest answer is no. Sanctions against Zimbabwe have not delivered what they were desired to do. Why on earth the United States of America and Great Britain continue to hang on to a policy that's proven time and time to be totally unsuccessful, I do not know. Time to change.
Okay, I think we're budgeted to speak for 30 minutes, and we have just passed that 30 minutes. I would like to ask if there's anything else you want to say before we quickly look at the comments and close this.
I urge the Mozambique government, President Nyusi, to take the initiative, approach the government of Tanzania with the mediation of the Zimbabwean president, South African president, to get the situation under control. Look, just to take you a memory down memory lane, it was President Samora Machel who came to ask President Mugabe and the rest of his counterparts to ask for assistance. That led to Operation Lemon, Operation Grapefruit, and Operation Lifeline. Mozambique, President Nyusi can do that again. I rest.
Okay, Major, let me give you some comments here that you have received. Does SADC not have a budget for such a crisis in the region?
Not a budget to command such a war. I can certainly say they have an administration budget to keep the organization going, but I don't believe they have a war fund.
Okay. Second question, the USA is sponsoring this Al-Shabaab. Where there is oil, USA will sponsor destabilization and they'll come and rescue while they loot the resources. Is that true?
I wouldn't argue with that. I don't know whether that situation applies in this case, but this is not the first time that I've heard it.
Okay. The question should be, what are the expatriates doing there? Covert operations.
The expatriates that we all know about are conducting gas operations, exploration, and oil operations. Whether they are expatriates involved with Al-Suna, we certainly know that there's foreign fighters there. We've seen them. Whether you call them expatriates, well, I suppose it depends which side of the camp you are on. But I assume the question is being asked about the civilian expatriates.
Correct.
But if that's the case, we all know what they're doing there. They're looking for money.
Okay. Right. Major Bobby Supiya, I do not want to keep you any longer, and your number is on the screen. I would like people to engage with you. And maybe what we should do is, after a week, we should come back and give an update, because my understanding is that the number of casualties is much higher. And I was talking to someone who is there, and they said Zimbabweans in Mozambique, both military operators, private security, hotel staff, they've been using Mozambique IDs. So they go into Mozambique and they buy Mozambican identity and they use Mozambique names. And most of those are going to be buried in mass graves, according to my sources who are on the ground. In fact, I have someone who was in the hotel the day before the attack, who I was talking to yesterday, and today they're in Palma. So we have quite a number of people who are on the ground. Unfortunately, because of the communication that has been cut, we're unable to do video. And I don't think it will be safe for them to do that even. How can we solve this issue of Zimbabweans using fake identity and working as private security and mercenaries over there in Mozambique?
That's a $9 million question. My simplest answer is this: the world is moving. Zimbabwe is part of that. People migrate from one country to another looking for greener pastures. It's happening everywhere. Now, the issue about using IDs, if a system is manipulable in that way that one can obtain a Mozambique ID, and that's the simplest way of doing so in order to integrate, people will use it. The same thing is happening in South Africa. It's no different. And I can tell you that even in the UK, there are people who have adopted other people's IDs. So identity theft, if I can call it that, is rife throughout the whole world. Zimbabweans are no different situation, and therefore there is no other way of doing things if people need to to make a living in a way they think is better than in their own countries. You'll always have this.
Okay, I think we have had so much information from you today, Major Bobby Supiya, especially the issue raised on Tanzania. I think this is very, very important. And maybe we need to dig a bit deeper next time on the history of Tanzania, the groups there, their military structure, and how their whole government works. Because most of us don't understand how Tanzania is and how it works, how much of a military power it is, and how much of an economic power it is. Also, the relationship between Mozambique and Tanzania, I think that's something that we need to unpack in greater detail.
I agree. I mean, Tanzania played a very important part in the Mozambican War of Independence, which was from 1965 to 1974. Just as much as Tanzania played a very important part in our independence. We had 2 military bases in Tanzania for Zanla. And then the same way, Mozambique had about 4 military bases in Tanzania. So the relationship was there, but somehow down the line, it's broken up. And it simply needs to be repaired.
Thank you very much, Major. And before you go, are you still running a company yourself in the UK?
I'm now a lawyer. My security analyst, I did used to have a security company in the UK. In fact, at one stage, I ran one at that time, one of the biggest security companies here in the UK, which essentially employed what you now call door supervisors and bodyguards. But I drifted away from that many years ago, and I am now just a lawyer. I follow matters of international security as a hobby, to keep myself abreast of events. And I'm called upon every now and then to give my opinion or advice on certain things, but that's all there is to it.
Right. Thank you very much, Major Bobby Supiya. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I'm sure everyone here enjoyed the information that you gave us tonight. Thank you very much, Major, and thank you everyone who's watching from home, and good night.
Thank you. Good night.